I hope you're well. In this one, it's a pleasure to tell you about the 3D printed drilling guide for the Router multi-jig. And yes, I promise it's the last multi-jig video for a little while, apart from cameos in future builds, of course. So the 10-minute workshop multi-jig launched publicly a few weeks back, and thanks so much to everyone who made a purchase or placed a pre-order. All of those outstanding initial purchases shipped last weekend. Thank you everybody for your patience. I had a couple of questions about a drilling guide for the jig, and I lashed together a quick DIY option, which actually worked surprisingly well. The only trouble was that if you are starting from absolute scratch, you'd need to buy a few things for it: a 30mm Forstner bit and an extended length guide bush and a pack of sleeve bearings. Before you know it, you could end up spending as much as the jig itself, and you'd still have to make the drilling guide. Now, normally, and what I did with the loose tenon jig was that I had an extra 5mm hole in the jig on the same 32mm centers, so you could just use the reference pins to move the jig along and bore more holes. But with the multi-jig, there just wasn't space for that. One of the compromises I had to make was on the size of the jig. By making the height a few millimeters smaller, it meant that I could get an extra row of jigs to a sheet, which meant that I could keep the cost down, and I really am trying to deliver value with this jig. But a 5mm drilling guide alongside the 5mm reference pins had me thinking, so I had a chat with friend of the channel and 3D printing expert Stu Parker from SP Wood Creations. Stu makes the Benchdog collars that are included in the full bundle. I drew something up roughly in SketchUp, and within a couple of days I had a physical product back through the post. It was exactly what I'd drawn, and I knew as soon as I picked it up that this was not the finished product. The basics were there, but it was too chunky, too clunky. So back to SketchUp for a bit more thought and some revisions, and a few more days later I received this, and this is the one. So it does two things, scratches two itches. It is a drilling guide, useful, as mentioned before, if you don't have a plunge router but you still want to use the multi-jig for bar handles or shelf pin holes, especially in cabinetry that's already installed. The body has a slight taper to it, so it fits precisely into the jig, but it's also easy to remove. And it's just the right size, giving full support to the sleeve bearing that keeps the drill bit accurate but not bottoming out in the jig. But because of the recess in the top of the guide, it also lets you extend the row of shelf pin holes using one of the reference pins that comes with the jig to move it along precisely on 32mm centers. I'm so pleased with this. It works so well, and it really increases the usefulness, the functionality of the Router multi-jig. Now, I'm not planning on offering this with the jig. It remains a Router jig at heart, and to be frank, my store just isn't really geared up to be offering smaller items individually. But Stu Parker has this in his store at SP Wood Creations, link in the description as always, and currently for the great price of under £10. Here's the thing though, the multi-jig has sold well internationally despite the high shipping costs that we have here in the UK, and thank you everybody who's gritted their teeth and made a purchase. But if you're abroad, even the cost of shipping a small item like this may well be a deal breaker, and I completely understand that. So I'm having discussions with a couple of makers, content creators that I know who also have 3D printed product businesses of their own, one in Australia and one in the United States, to see if they'd be interested in being local suppliers in those geographies. Now, this isn't a commercial venture for me. They would handle this from their own stores and be responsible for setting their own prices. It's just about getting the product out to existing jig owners at the lowest possible shipping costs. Both parties have expressed an interest. They have the 3D files already, and their sample jigs are on the way, and I'll keep you posted on any progress with that as it happens. But that's where we are for now. It's just a quick one this week to tell you about this. If you're on the fence about the jig, let me know in the comments if the option or inclusion of a drilling guide at the time of purchase would sway your decision. But I'll call this one done for this week. Thanks so much for taking a look. Don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll catch you in the next one. All right, take care.